Yo, what's up everybody? It's your boy NoisySauce here with another video. Today I'm going to be going through with you my beat making template.
Throwing some sauce on that beat.
So I've changed this template quite a bit since I started making beats, and it will continue to change as I have different tastes in synths and drums and just how I like things laid out. But this is where it's at right now. I'm going to take you through each channel, starting with this plugins channel. Now this one serves two purposes. The first one being I've got an empty region here that I can quickly change to the length of the loop section. And that means that when I bounce it out, I'm always bouncing out the same length of beat. This is pretty handy, and I always like to do this so that if I've got tail lengths, I can drag the region to the end of the tail length and then bump that across so that it has the exact same loop length every single time. The second feature is in the mix window. It's got all of these plugins here, and they're my regularly used plugins. I use these quite a lot all the time. They're always changing, but right now this is the lot that I've got. And the reason I've got these here is so I can quickly alt drag these onto any channel at any time without having to go through the plugins menu and find them. Pretty handy hint, and just a time saver. Next up, I've got my drum subgroup, and in here I've got a version of Battery, and this is currently on my trap drum set, which is fairly standard. My kicks are all bus to this one kicks group. My snares and claps are all bus to this group. Percussion is all bus to here, and all my hi-hats and shakers are bus to the cymbals group, and they're all color-coded to reflect where they're going. I've picked these drums as my favorites over time, and they will continue to change, but this is what I've got right now. I won't go through all the drums with you because that would be hella boring. I then also have all of these different groups here. I'll just jump over to the other mix window. I have the kick snares, percussion and cymbals, and also my tune snares, which I'll go through later. They're all bused to this reverb unit here with my favorite reverb, Chromaverb, with a setting that I've spent a bit of time creating. You can check out my video on that, which I've already released. Next up, I'll also show you, I've just got a channel EQ here. This is here so I can quickly rip out high frequencies on the snares, which I do quite often. And on the cymbals bus, I've got a limiter, which is always kind of limiting the hi-hats a little bit, which I quite like the sound of, but you can push that up and down. Next up, I got the 808s channel. This is currently running a Arturia version of the Mini, and this is on the 808 boom setting here, which I've mapped to my keyboard and also played around with the sounds a little bit to get them exactly where I want them. I got this then running through this multipass plugin, which is by Kilohertz. That's on the 808 beef setting, which again I've messed around with a bit to get the right sound. It really pumps up that quite a bit, and then I've also got it running into a decapitator, which is running parallel, so I can get some quite heavy distorted 808 sounds going on there. Next up, I got the tuned hats, which is also another version of Battery. And what I've got here is I've got 6 different hi-hats, which I quite like the sound of. And each one of them is pitched across the space of an octave. This makes it really easy to just go through all of the hi-hat, like go through my keyboard, find exactly the hi-hat sound I'm looking for, and be able to play some tuned hats and get that nice trappy sound. The exact same thing I got going with the snare drum, with 6 different snares, and again they're tuned across an octave each, so you can quickly get that like trappy tuned snare sound. Again, this hi-hat, the tuned hi-hats are running through a limiter, and the snare drum, as I said before, is running into my reverb. Next up, I've got the bass sounds, and these are pretty simple. I've just got this massive bass, which is a fairly standard clean bass sound. Oh, it's not super clean, but it's about as clean as I get. Got this dirty sound, which is a bit more hectic. A bit more chorusy, a bit more verby, and that's from Arturia's Analog Labs. I've got this mini. This is probably my favorite bass sound. It's also the newest edition. It's also based off the mini that I had the 808 on, and it's this setting called A Bass You'll Use. And it's just super simple bass sound. Love it. And then finally, I've got this bass guitar, which is just a Logic preset that I've adapted a little bit. Next up, I've got my piano sounds, and there's a whole bunch of different pianos. So I've got my electric piano sound, I got my standard piano, I've got an effects piano, and this is my one of my favorite Logic presets. It's called Ghost Piano. Just like super creepy, good for adding in like cool parts to stuff. I've got an organ sound, that's from Arturia, and I've also got a clavinet sound, which this one's quite affected, and that's also from Arturia. I do love Arturia's synthesizers. Next up, I got the synths subgroup, and so I've got another Moog. Fairly standard lead sound. I got this Prophet. Really affected. I got this CSV lead. Again, very affected. This is one of my favorites. This is one of the bell sounds from Massive, and I got it from the bell or pad preset. And it's just a really cool trap bell. Anywhere you play that thing on the keyboard, it's quite useful, and I do love that sound. One of the best bells I've ever heard. And if you hold it down, it turns into quite a cool pad as well, which I'm guessing why it's called bell or pad. Then finally, I've got this atmospheric pad. Just cool for adding like an ambience underneath anything. Just a cool sound. Next up, I've got a bunch of recording setups here. So I've got guitar, bass, acoustic, and Vox tracking. The guitar and bass are both running into input 2, and acoustic and Vox tracking are input 1. I have a TRS, like guitar lead, that's running into input 2, so I can quickly just put that in and have a guitar or bass sound ready to go. And for the acoustic and the Vox tracking, I can just have the microphone either recording vocals or acoustic guitar. And I've got presets on each one of those ready to go, and they sound pretty good. I've been messing around with those for a little while. Next up, I got the effects bus, and this has just 3 channels in it. One of them is the Rise and Hit synth from Contact, from Native Instruments, and this is a really cool it's got a riser and then an explosion. This can easily be changed through a bunch of the presets that are part of the same pack. They're all quite usable and pretty epic. Next up, I got strikes, which is also part of Contact, the action strikes, and these are really cool for adding like cinematic sounds to the beat, and I end up using them not a lot, but they're really cool for if you just need like a big impact at the start of a bar or something. It's just it got lots of cool sounds there. And finally, in that section, I've got my snare clap riser, which is an audio file which I've dragged in, and this is just a riser that I made from slapping a wall in a stairwell twice, hard panning them left and right, adding a bunch of reverb and reversing it, and this is what you get. Oh no, sorry, this is what you get. Pretty simple, but it ends up being a really good riser for a lot of my purposes. The last thing on my list is I've got my voice tag here, which I use on all of my beats because you got to know who's done it, and it's already sitting pretty much in the exact right position, ready to go into, like, after the first 8 bars, ready to go into the chorus. You can drag it around, but it's pretty ready to go. So
Throwing some sauce on that beat.
And the cool thing about that is that it's already in polyphonic flex time. So if I speed up the track, that is.
Throwing some sauce on that beat. Throwing some sauce on that beat.
It goes in time with it so that it sounds good every time. That's it, guys. That is my template. That's how I roll on every single one of my beats. This is the starting point. Oh, actually, one last thing is my stereo bus, which has this, which is the most important thing. It's a Pro Q2 equalizer, but I use it as a spectrum analyzer. I got my Iosis Air EQ, and this acts as my mastering EQ. I've got the Slate Digital VBC FG Grey. This is a really cool bus compressor and works really well as the stereo out compressor. And finally, I've got the T-Rax soft clipper, and this just pretty much acts as a limiter for all of my beats. I sometimes change what's in this master section here, but most of the time it's these 3 plugins and my spectrum analyzer, so I can see what's going on. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll catch you next time.